right, how we doing out there, guys? So welcome back to another episode of the Bastion Black Performance Podcast. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about, kind of squads or small unit composition and kind of, I guess my thoughts or my ideals with it. And it stems from, obviously I get asked this a lot, just by people in, video comments and sending me messages and things. But also, like, I've talked in a lot of my videos about problems that I see or problems that I personally experienced with various weapons or organizational, methods or issues that we had when I was in. So I thought this would kind of just be a good opportunity to talk about this from a standpoint of like kind of what are the basics of, like small unit, composition and organization, and also, to put out some of my like theoretical or some of what I would, potentially recommend for, kind of comparable, composition and things like that. So we'll kind of get started a little bit. We'll kind of describe real quick a little bit about like, we'll talk about with like, unit composition. And obviously my personal experience comes from being in the Marine Corps, which is obviously, very similar to the Army, but it is also substantially different in certain ways. So when we talk about the U.S. military and most militaries in general, we kind of talk about like what the mission is, and then we'll kind of talk about like organizational basics. What the mission of the infantry is, in its most basic sense, is to locate, close with, and destroy the enemy. And within that, so we talk about, via fire and maneuver, and then via, defensive positions and repelling enemy counterattacks and things like that. Like, if any of my Marine brethren want to go back and read your 6-5 and all that stuff, have at it. So the mission of the infantry is to locate, close with, and destroy the enemy. We talk about like some tripartite organization basics. So tripartite is I don't know, everyone for some reason decided to adopt French words, and you know my thoughts on the French. But tripartite, basically what it means is like, for the most part, like all militaries use what would be like their units are all subdivided into threes. So for that example, it's kind of, it makes things simple, kind of like the rule of three. And so talking about small units, so we'll kind of start with, battalion and work our way on down. Because, I mean, battalion is, it's typically, at least when I was in, it's the largest single group that deploys, but obviously you pretty much never do a battalion-sized operation. So battalion in the Marine Corps is, over 1,000, maybe as many as 1,500 guys, kind of depending. So each battalion has three, what we call them, line companies, three line companies, a weapons company, and then a headquarters and service company. Down from there, so you have a company. So a company has three line platoons or three rifle platoons, and then a weapons platoon. And then within the rifle platoons, there are three squads. And within the weapons platoon, there are three sections: mortar section, machine gun section, and then assault or rocket small section. And that's basically the same for everybody. So pretty much like, typically speaking, like even you're talking about like the Army, like all of your brigades have three regiments, all of your regiments have three battalions, all of your battalions have three companies, all of your companies have three platoons, all your platoons have three squads, all of your squads have three teams, all of your team leaders have three individual Marines, or individual soldiers, like, kind of so on and so forth. And obviously there's some variation, but that's the basics of it, when it comes to that. And so obviously, as you kind of heard me describe that, is, well, technically there's four companies, and there's four platoons, within a company, is in the formal role, what we call like the reinforced role or the augmented role, the weapons section of both a battalion, but also the weapons section of a company gets subdivided and kind of pieced out to the three line platoons. So one thing that you're looking at is, so weapons platoon, for example, has a mortar section that has three mortars, a machine gun section that has six machine guns, and then a small section, an assault man section that has six small rocket launchers. So when actually augmented out, and so for example, like with my unit when we were, in Phantom Fury and we were doing kind of a conventional role, so basically each platoon gets two machine guns, and two small rocket launchers with them. And then the 60 millimeter mortars typically tend to stay with the company, because obviously the 60 mortars range is, 3,500 meters or so. So it's not like you'd have to take them directly with you. to use individually for a platoon. You could, but typically they stay back as a company level asset, because obviously having 3 mortar tubes together is significantly more, potential firepower available than like each platoon being able to just call on one, singular mortar when it comes to that. So kind of some considerations to think of when it comes to, our small units and stuff like that. And again, we're kind of, talking down more the squad level, primarily, but so having the tripartite, having the rule of 3, it makes command and control very simple. That's the main reason that you do it, is so if you kind of think of it, from a leader's standpoint, so going from the fire team all the way up to the regiment, and all the way up to division, realistically, each leader only has 3, subordinate leaders that he typically works directly with. So for example, a fire team leader has 3 Marines under him. So he has 3 guys that he controls. A squad leader has 3 fire teams. So while yes, as a squad leader, I could and would go place individual people or move them around if I needed to, but basically, like, for most of my, for like general examples, is I just go to the fire team leader. I have 3 fire team leaders. I'm like, hey, team 1, can I get you guys over here? Team 2, can I get you here? And team 3, can you guys be in this building here? And then it's incumbent on the fire team leader to place the guys correctly. Conversely, the platoon sergeant, platoon commander would, he has 3 squad leaders under his command, so he'd just be like, hey, Grease, I need your squad to go over here. I need such and such squad over here. And then it's on me to do some of the more individual placement and, kind of going all the way up. And so that's very important from a command and control standpoint, because, you talk about this a lot, like historically speaking, and especially, when you talk about like large, like levied or like conscript, part-time militia type military examples, is what you don't need is one guy who either has to or is trying to go out and individually give orders to 30 different dudes. Because one, he's doing too much, but then it also means that he's not able to be freed up to go do more leadership related tasks and stuff like that. So, like I said, kind of, talking like that basics, as far as our mission, our organization, our consideration. So now I'll kind of give some current and some theoretical examples and just kind of like walk my way through it. And I'm not going to give like an over exhaustive every single bit of equipment, every single this or that. That's way too much. I'm going to talk in like general concepts and what I think, what we currently have, and also like what I think basic capabilities would have. Some of the individual weapons or the individual optics or individual equipment could be mission based or whatever. So don't look too deeply into that. But so again, so it kind of, we'll pop forward to, so as it sits right now, so the Marine Rifle Squad has recently been updated. And so we'll kind of talk a little bit about, so what it is currently is it is now a 15-man squad. So as you can see up here, so you have a squad leader, an assistant squad leader, a squad systems operator, which kind of represent quote unquote a headquarters element. So the squad systems operator is a guy who operates like a drone, and he has a tablet, and he's kind of an information / like technology guy. And then he has 3 fire teams that are composed of a team leader, an automatic rifleman, a grenadier, and a rifleman. And in the case of the Marine Corps, the rifle squad, what they're basically doing is shifting to giving everyone the M27 Iar. The M27 Iar is basically it's a modified version of the HK416. So it's a short stroke gas piston weapon. It fires closed bolt on semi-auto, and then on fully automatic it fires from an open bolt. So very similar to the Browning automatic rifle of World War I and World War II, I guess in Korea kind of time frame. And now it is slightly different than what I was in. So when I was in, the Marine Corps squad did not have the assistant squad leader or the squad systems operator. So a squad at the time was 13. So 1 squad leader and then 3 teams of 4. So kind of flash ahead now to the U.S. Army. So the Army is basically like similar in composition. The difference is that they only have 2 fire teams. They have a squad leader and then they have 2 teams of 4. As far as that goes, I've talked about it in other videos. In my personal opinion, 2 elements in a squad is not enough. 3 is absolutely optimal. And the reason for that, I've talked about in some of my other videos, is, for example, like when I'm out, patrolling, and for some of this, you're going to kind of have to keep in mind that, like, I can't speak in like every single individual example. And when you talk about organizationally, you can't change your organization based on like every single individual mission or something you might get. You have to have a general organization, and then sometimes on the fly, or if there's something specific that you need to add or change or whatever, you can do it. But you can't just be like, oh, well, because we're moving into a wooded environment, now we're gonna we're going to have 4 squads instead of 3. Like you don't do that. But so, considering, like I said, when I was, a squad leader and, running patrols and operations and things like that, I really liked, we kind of started with the satellite patrolling and then worked into what I called the bounding Overwatch when we would patrol. So, and I've talked about this in some of my other videos, so I'm not going to like try to break out an actual visual example here. But so basically you imagine, so we're patrolling. So instead of having 3 teams that are either all on the same road doing tactical column or like all like completely separate, and doing, following sort of like a given general route, but doing their own thing. What we kind of shifted to sort of make up for some of our issues with our electronic comms, and just also kind of deal with our general safety and, ability to respond to things and observe things on patrol is we shifted to a bounding Overwatch. So what I typically do is one of the teams would basically, find a building or maybe a position or something, and they would kind of set up there. And so then they would be kind of like, doing Overwatch, sort of stationary and looking at things. The other 2 would be patrolling and, doing whatever it was they were doing on that particular patrol. And then while they were going, they would be kind of looking for like the next spot. And then one of the other teams would be like, oh, hey, hey, Corporal Grease, I found a building over here. I'd be like, okay, cool, go ahead and get in it. And then as they go to get in that, I tell the team that's set up, I'd be like, hey, you can pick up and Charlie Mike, continue mission. And it kind of just roll on itself like that. So a couple of the major advantages that something like that gave us was that one, there's a kind of a chance for, a fire team to sort of take a little bit of a breather, like obviously like just walking around is not super tiring, but like if you're out for a couple hours and it's hot and you're carrying a lot of gear, it's like, your focus can kind of, ebb and flow on some of that stuff. And if you've been in one area for too long, it gets a little bit boring because most of the time, obviously nothing is happening. Another thing is it gives you a chance and, kind of an excuse to just sort of sit down and just observe and take things in for a bit, which is what you should be doing on patrol anyways. But sometimes that kind of gets lost in, because you're doing a lot of individual tasks when you're like out doing a movement. It's like every 3 to 5 steps you need to check behind you and make sure that the guy behind you is still up. You need to be checking for your avenues of approach and your all your roadways and walkways and things like that. You also need to be, keeping in contact with the guy in front of you. Oh shit, he took a left there. I need to make sure I take a left. And oh hey, there's some townspeople over on the right watching me. And like, oh hey, there's some trash out in the road here. Oh shit, it's been 3 to 5 steps that I check back behind me for, for my buddy Thompson or what, And so like, there's kind of a lot of things going on, and so it's sort of nice also. And what you should be doing is just kind of just sit there and be like, all right, bam. While we're stationary here, now I can kind of just take it in. Like, oh hey, I see, so-and-so's team over here and so-and-so's team over there, but like, there seems to be kind of this group of people that's sort of trailing them. We're like, oh, hey, as they turned right and took down here, there's a group of people, but as soon as they saw them, they took off running. Okay, these are things to take note of. Or like, oh, hey, as Thompson's squad kind of came around the corner over here, like all of a sudden everybody bolted and it's just super quiet, Or hey, it sounds like there's some contact going on over there, Are they in an actual contact? Did they just shoot at a vehicle that was getting too close? Did somebody shoot at a dog? Like, it was an ND, like what's going on? So we know to kind of take it in, from that. So you always have 2 elements that can be moving. Whereas, if you have the Army rifle squad set up and you wanted to do something similar, is like you could only have 1 element. So half of your squad at any given time would be stuck, not doing anything. And we did replace an Army unit, a battalion of the 82nd Airborne on part of my second deployment, and they had like an 8-man squad because they were down a couple guys, I think, because of casualties or whatever. And it was like when we kind of went on a couple joint patrols with them during changeover, is like they did kind of basic tactical column, and they were sort of all on this one road. And like I remember like just looking, I was like, man, like you basically can't see anything. Like you're all on this one road, and there's walls there and stuff. It's like you guys basically are just, you're not seeing any of the environment. You're not doing very much. So I really liked our, kind of our 3 element sections to that. But I did also do a fair amount of like 2 section sort of setups. So as I talked about before so my squad, we were down a couple of guys. So when we deployed for my second deployment, I think the squad was short 2 guys. Like we just didn't have the numbers when we deployed. So my fire team, so when I was a fire team leader, when I first got there in my second deployment, I only had 2 guys in my team. And then one of the other fire teams only had, or had 3 total, so 2 other guys. One of our other teams only had 3 total guys, and then we had 1 team of 4, but we had an augment from weapons platoon. So then about a month into my second deployment, our fire team, or our squad leader, kind of got, demoted / moved over to headquarters platoon, and I got promoted. So now the team that I was in control of now only had 2 guys. usually we would take a corpsman with us. So our platoon had two corpsmen, so we'd usually augment with a corpsman, when you were out on, patrols and things like that, and we could afford to have one corpsman in one squad. And so I would augment, what used to be my fire team with that. So I still kind of technically had two teams of three. But so a lot of times, when it would be like nighttime, we would want to go, they'd send us out to go set up like observation over this section of the river or this section of the road or whatever. Well, three guys is not enough to both take over a house or a building, have observation up on the roof, one for safety, but also to observe the thing we're supposed to be observing, and have enough people inside to keep security. Because obviously you have to have people that are watching the doors to make sure that nobody that's outside comes in, whether, hostile or whether just inadvertent. And also, a lot of these houses had people in them, so you always had to have somebody dedicated to like watching the people. And most of the time, if we were in a house that was occupied, we'd just tell them to sit in the living room and watch TV, and we just have one person assigned to kind of watch them. So what I would do, basically didn't have any choice, I'd break my squad into two elements. So, I'd send like the corpsman to go with, my fire team that had four guys. So it was a team of five, and then I would send the other five guys would go somewhere else, and I would go attach myself to one of them, depending on whatever we were doing, and kind of split in two elements. And it was a necessary evil for that, but it definitely sucked. Like maneuver-wise, you couldn't really do anything. You only had two positions on that. So I definitely think the three elements is massively superior in every way. So now another couple differences. So when I was in, and this is different, so we'll flash back to the Marine Corps one again. So this I actually completely approve of. So when I was in, the fire team leader was the Grenadier. And so you had a M16A4, and then you had 203 grenade launcher. I talked about that in one of my previous videos about, doctrine versus individual experience. So if you haven't listened to that one or watched that one, please do. But I hated that. The 203 on a rifle makes the rifle suck at everything, and but it also adds all these other things. You got a team leader who's supposed to be doing low-level unit leader stuff. He's still responsible for some communication, still responsible for, kind of issuing orders and taking care of stuff like that. But then it's like, oh, hey, if we want, some accurate, kind of close in, semi-indirect or, kind of direct explosive ordnance, now this guy has to be the one to do it. Whereas now I really like having another guy as a designated Grenadier, because now you could just have this guy while the fire team leader is doing his thing. You could just be like, hey, so and so, give me 10 HEDP, kind of in and around that compound over there. All right, cool, no problem. The other difference is when I was in, the automatic rifleman carried the SAW, the M249, and I've gone on often and long about how I hated that. I thought that really cut down on the ability of the squad to the fire team to accomplish tasks, and vis-a-vis the team, the squad as well, because a fully loaded SAW weighs something like 23.06 pounds, and technically speaking, one of the guys in the fire team was the assistant automatic rifleman. So he was supposed to be carrying things, allegedly to assist the automatic rifleman, but I've never experienced and I've never heard of anyone in the history of the modern Marine Corps where the assistant automatic rifleman did anything for the automatic rifleman. So what you have is this one guy who's carrying all this extra weight, all this extra, ammo and stuff like that. And when I was in, I couldn't stand this, but they made us carry our A barrels, so our spare barrel, out on patrol with us, which was completely stupid. Nobody in the modern war has changed, in the modern realm has ever changed a barrel on a machine gun in an actual engagement. And then first deployment, for example, I did not have night vision goggles, like whether the 7s or the 14s or anything like that. I had what we called a 17 Bravo, which was it's a scope that you mount to the top of a weapon. And it's actually, in that regard, it's a very good optic. It's good night vision. It's basically got a red dot in the middle of it for usage. But so what that means is that, one, I have to carry this thing, which weighs a couple of pounds. It's pretty heavy and it's really bulky. But it also means that, like, just walking around, I didn't have night vision. So I was, without night vision. But then the other thing that it meant is, so anytime I would like stop, or anytime I would pull my SAW up to my shoulder and look through my 17s to kind of take a look around, I would kill my natural, like my body's night vision, and then take off walking again. So basically, it's kind of the worst of both worlds, is I could stop, observe through a night vision scope, kind of see things or whatever, but then as soon as I took it down, now my own personal night vision is affected. And so I had a lot of problems with that, like organization. Like, one, I just hated carrying a freaking SAW, like everybody did. Especially what we were doing my first deployment, with the types of, foot mobile patrols we'd be on. But then I thought that it inhibited our mobility and our ability to do tasks so much that I thought it was a huge force, subtractor. And so what I kind of, if there's nothing else that you take away from the video, like one thing that I wanted to say is like, the way to kind of think of, the rifle squad, the rifle platoon, the rifle company is the reason that the military exists. And I'm not being, hyperbolic or exaggerating for effect. Like without the rifle platoon, there is no point of having the military. The machine gun section, the mortar section, the small section, weapons company, all the armored stuff like that. Without the rifle platoon, none of that is worth anything. And so the way I kind of think of it, so I've spent my whole life playing sports. I was a college strength coach for a while. I'm still a competitive jiu-jitsu guy and competitive, pistol shooter and stuff like that. And so what I kind of started to think is when you think about it, if you like pick a sport or something, for example, like, let's take, you could take football, for example. Everyone watches football. So the kind of the way to think of it, in terms of, weapon squads, versus rifle platoons and things like that is like the rifle platoon is, the rifle platoon and the rifle squad is what you base everything off of. It's the offensive line, it's the quarterback, it's the running backs, the tight ends, it's the receivers, it's everything like that. Weapons augment, so the machine guns, the mortar, the SMAW, they're like your punter, your field goal kicker, your kick returner, those guys. Like they are absolutely necessary. They're absolutely useful. And if you have a really good one, they are a super dangerous weapon, but they don't individually win the game for you. They are kind of an extra, when it comes to that. And so then, the other thing I was kind of thinking of it and like, sort of the way to think about, organization and composition that I kind of like, kind of came to me the other day is, a way to explain it is that like, if you look at all great teams or all great athletes, like if you're talking about like, individual sports like fighters or something like that, is they're pretty good at everything, but every one of them has something that they are really good at, possibly the best at. And so if we think of that in terms of a squad, because we're talking about squad or low, small unit size composition here. So if we think about that is so we use my personal example when I was in where we still had the saws and the 203s and stuff like that is so were we technically pretty good at everything? I don't know, maybe. Like I think we were too weighted down and our weapons were too clunky with extra stuff on them. But like, okay, like maybe we can kind of say that. But then it's like, okay, tell me the thing that we were exceptionally good at. Well, the fire team has, one person who is carrying too much stuff and it's too big to be super effective in really tight confines and and also there's a certain kind of agility that goes along with urban combat. You're running up steps. There's like a lot of rubble and things like that, so you kind of got to be careful with your feet. You're hopping over small walls. Sometimes you're fitting in like really small gaps. You blew a hole into a wall with explosives or a rocket or a tank or something like that. So one guy's dragging you back, but also you can't leave one guy by himself. So we couldn't take the saw gunner and be like, hey, Lance Corporal so-and-so, how about you just stay over here by yourself and we're going to go over here. Like one, now you're getting rid of one member of your small unit, but also like you can't just leave a guy by himself, obviously. So you have to take him with you. And then obviously the team leader with the 203 and all this extra weight and stuff like that, like his individual performance is severely impacted as well. Because now he's also expected to do all the communications and small level, leadership related decisions and tasks and things like that. So, that's kind of one thing that I thought is I was like, man, like we were not like really freaking good at anything. So when I kind of flash forward to here to some of my thoughts on like small to like squad composition is, I made it with the goal in mind that I would rather be pretty okay at all of the general infantry tasks, but be absolutely fantastic at fire and maneuver and general like small unit mobility than to have any sort of mix of the other things. As far as like, having all these additional weapons that add one additional capability but detract from all these other capabilities. So the way that I kind of looked at it is I'm like, hey, we need to be pretty good at dealing with threats out to, let's say 500 meters. We need to be pretty okay at, suppressive fire at longer distances. We've got a grenade launcher so we can kind of, we can deal with some indirect or some reasonably direct explosives and things like that. But like when it comes down to it, we need to be fan-fucking-tastic at basic fire and maneuver. So I want guys who are mobile, guys who have weapons that are, very user-friendly and very effective in realistic combat ranges, which is under 300 meters and realistically under 200 meters for effective fire, and who don't get super fatigued, who aren't like overly weighed down, but also have some amount of or maximum commonality, or what we call like continuity amongst all weapon systems. We'll kind of flash ahead here. So I kind of looked at, I did three sort of thoughts or three sort of examples that I thought that I would kind of use, and we'll kind of go through that. So the lane squad, the augmented squad here. So what the augmented squad is kind of taken into account, so like I said, how we would augment with guys from weapons platoon and things like that potentially. But so like I said, the Marine Corps is switching to the 15-man squad, and I do think that for the most part, military operations are kind of switching to squad level operations as being kind of the standard. So you're kind of left in a little bit of a no man's land where, okay, if the squad level is going to be the primary level that they're dealing with, then the squad needs to be autonomous or almost completely autonomous as far as its weapon systems and its ability to deal with things. And so so to that end, I see I put Corman on there twice, but anyways, so towards that end, I kept the same basic 15-man delineation of the new Marine squad. So we have the squad leader, the assistant squad leader, the squad technology, the drone operator guy, and then I added a corpsman because, like I said, normally we had like 2 corpsmen per platoon. So if we were sending out individual squad operations, we typically carried a corpsman with us on that, and then 3 fire teams that have a team leader, rifleman, grenadier, automatic rifleman. Now your augments would be a machine gunner and basically his assistant / his gun team leader, and then a rocket team, and then his assistant / team leader. And so for a squad level automatic, and I've got a couple examples, what I'm thinking, like personally, is I like the M249. I like the SAW, the FN Mini-Me, whatever you want to call it, this is another thing I never fundamentally like grasped, like being in the Marine Corps. So the SAW, the actual designation of it is the M249 squad automatic weapon. But we had 3 of them in the squad. Whereas like I think it's actually like a perfect squad level weapon because it is significantly lighter. So unloaded, it weighs 10 pounds less than the M240 does. If you add 1 guy to him, now they could split the load. So now instead of the SAW gunner always carrying 600 or 800 rounds, he could carry 400 or 500, and then his gun team leader / his assistant could carry 400 or 500. And and if you wanted to carry the spare barrel, you could. But now they could be a legit squad automatic weapon role. But we do know that the SAW, while not perfect, is capable as an individual weapon. So it's not like you would have someone who is completely incapable at the individual level. Whereas you take the 240, the FN Mag, for example, the 240, I mean, it's the best medium machine gun, I think, like probably in history. I mean, definitely, in the post-World War II era. But so when I was in, we had the 240 Golf. The 240 Golf weighs 25.06 pounds. Unloaded. Well, you can't really load it. There's no way to carry additional ammo like on it except for just kind of draping a belt. And then now they've shifted to the 240 Bravo. The Army has a 240 Bravo, and it weighs like 27.5 pounds because it has a heat shield on the top of the barrel, and also it does not have the adjustable gas regulator, so you can't switch between 3 rates of fire on that. So that is an excellent like platoon level like support weapon, but one. It is a big, like, traditional machine gun. Like, you have to use it on the bipod or you have to use it on the tripod. I mean, yes, standing up, you can technically kind of hip shoot it, but it's like, it's not, you can't clear buildings or anything with it, like anything like that. So it's just a totally different role. And then going down to the rocket team leader. So, for the rocket, so like the Marine Corps has the Mark 153 small. And so, when I kind of envisioned it, I looked at, the small, I looked at the Carl Gustav, and there had to be some sort of reason that the Marine Corps went with the small back when they did. I don't know why it is, but when I look at, like all of the maximum effective range, the types of, the myriad types of, of rounds that it can shoot and things like that, the Gustav is far and away better. And the other thing, too, is, so I'll flash ahead here in a second. So with the Carl Gustav, when you load it, you actually kind of open the back, so we'd call it the Venturi, or where the so the flared out, rear sight is where the backblast comes out, and you load the round into that. So whatever you carry around with the Gustav as the overall length does not increase when you load it, whereas the small is the exact opposite. So with the small, when you load it, you actually take the round and it attaches into the back of the small and sticks out. So it becomes about like 2 feet longer when you actually have the rocket attached to it. And so the weight is basically similar. The range for the Gustav is massively better. So I don't honestly know why it was that that the Marine Corps went with the small, but there must have been some sort of reason for it. But dogs barking out there, so they're probably gonna hear that on camera. But so I'll kind of flash ahead. So, oh yeah, and so then when I was talking about the as far as like the team leader, rifleman, grenadier, stuff like that. So with them, I imagined a like a 14.5 inch kind of a standard like M4 link. Here's one I literally just Googled. 14.5 inch carbine and found one that represented essentially the types of things I like to see in a weapon. So it's got a low power variable optic. This one obviously has a white light, and then it has a like an IR light on top. It's obviously set up. It's obviously set up over here so that you could thread a suppressor on there. I would like to see a combination of low power variable optics as well as red dots, aim points, EOTechs on there. The LPVOs, they're very nice, and they definitely add a certain capability to them, but they're absolutely not as handy and easy to use, let's say like inside of 100 meters as a red dot is. So while maybe you have one or maybe you have two guys in a team that have LPVOs, I would definitely want somebody in there with a red dot, just because the red dot is very quick, very handy. Particularly in like close quarters environments, things like that. But also, something like this, which now everybody and their dog has. This is comparable setup to what I have. I have an aim point versus an LPVO, and then I have a white light. Same basic idea. And also, I like the 14.5 because one, it's more than accurate enough for standard combat distances, so 300 meters and in. Obviously, it's effective ballistically far past that, but it's in its element out to about 300. But then also, I like as short of length as we can get without sacrificing ballistic abilities, especially if we're thinking about having suppressors on there, which I know the Marine Corps talked about going to that, as well as having like every member of the squad with a suppressor, which I think would be a good idea. One, obviously, everyone likes a suppressor just to help kind of hide your own position and things like that. But another big reason, and this gets lost a lot, especially like in the gun control debate and stuff like that, is like one of the best reasons to have a suppressor is that, like, one, now you can tell who's firing amongst your own guys, because you can tell the difference between an AK and and an M16 kind of up close, or if you're kind of like not like right up next to it or whatever, but it's like everything going bang kind of sounds pretty similar. But also, okay, now you start hearing suppressed rounds, like, okay, suppressed, that must be us. And then also, being able to bring that decibel level down, the ability to communicate at the small team level goes up. So obviously, instead of like, blowing your ears out right away, like now, even with, if we have good comms gear, good ear pro or whatever with comms, integral, we can still communicate much better. So kind of thinking with that. And then, like I said, so for like squad automatic weapons, I like the 249. There's a few versions, like, Parasaw version like this one is. You could have, what they call like a, like a squad optic on there. Or the comparable would be like the PKM or the PKP. So the Russians, the Soviets really did a really good job when they when they had the PKM, the Pulemyat Kalashnikova, which is it's a true squad automatic weapon. Like unloaded, it weighs basically the same as like what a saw does. So it absolutely represents something between a carbine or a mag-fed rifle and something like our 240 or the M60 or the MG42, the MG3, whatever it might be. So like, I'm not saying a PKM specifically, but so thinking in terms of like, if I want an actual squad automatic weapon, I want something that is realistically one-man portable, but I want to have another, like an actual team on there so that it can be operated, one, to its maximum effect, but also, just so that it's like, man, if we want to get like maximum usage out of it, let's give the dude plenty of ammo. Let's give him somebody to help shoulder the burden, but also let's give him somebody to help direct his fire and otherwise like help him do the things he needs to do. Here's the Carl Gustav. So like I said, so we kind of look over here. So you actually open the back of the Carl Gustav open, and then you load it with whatever round that you want in there. So like the overall length of the system doesn't change when you load it, which is the opposite of the small. So then I kind of, like I said, I added two more. So let's say we're going to stick with the, what kind of the Marine Corps standard of the 15-man squad is, which I do like. I think it's sort of like teetering on being too big to be like a standard squad and not quite big enough to be like fully autonomous, but I think it's kind of right in the middle there. So again, squad leader, you got a drone operator / corpsman, you got three fire teams, same basic things. Like I said, rifles, 14.5-inch barrel, a mixture of low power variable optics and red dots for the automatic rifle, the M27. I've never shot an HK416. I don't know what it's like. From what I've read and what I've heard is mechanically it's reliable. It's a good like functioning weapon, but again, I've never personally shot. I don't know anyone that owns anything like that. But from like hearing guys on like special operations and stuff, because they kind of got those first, and a lot of them apparently don't like them. They started using them and then they went back to regular ARs because one, it's a little bit heavier, but also apparently it feels a little clunky. The recoil feels a little bit weird because it does have a short stroke gas piston, and it just doesn't have the same feel as your standard AR, your standard M16, M4, Car 15, whatever, whatever it is. And so a lot of them apparently they went back to just whatever their regular ARs and probably Mark 18s and things like that were. So again, just kind of thinking like that, then obviously, still having a dedicated grenadier. I absolutely like the idea of having the dedicated grenadier. I think that's super useful. One, seeing like watching videos in the Ukraine, both, them fighting kind of out in the wilderness, but also in in urban environments. And obviously I've done a lot of fighting in urban environments and stuff. The 40 millimeter grenade is very useful. It's not very powerful, and it doesn't hurt people as much as you wish that it does. But anything that you can do to like just wound or otherwise annoy the enemy is certainly very useful. It affects his ability to be effective. But one thing it's really good for is just things like being able to like shoot into windows of rooms and stuff. And again, you can't really rely on it causing really terrible casualties when it hits up there and stuff like that. But one thing that we used them for, and I think they're very effective, is just it helps drive people out of certain rooms, especially like let's say we're moving up on a house and we're going to make entry in this house or entry in this building. You might have a guy, a couple guys with 203s, or you might have a guy in a Mark 19. Put a couple 40 mics into the windows of the rooms that are nearest to where we are. So if nothing else, kind of drive them out of there. So now at the very least, we might not take fire in those windows coming up. Or when we get in and we start clearing the rooms, the first couple rooms are empty. So now we kind of have, we sort of have a foothold in the building instead of coming in and just instantly getting fired upon and kind of having to deal with that. So very useful, in that regard. And then also, it offers the chance to use things like smoke and pyro and stuff, which adds the ability to add additional communications and things like that. That was always one of our like kind of fallbacks is like, obviously like have your main radio, you have your our M-biter, the Prick 148, so like the kind of thing that looks like the big walkie-talkie that you especially used to talk to air and stuff like that. And then we had our little personal roll radios that we would talk to each other, which pretty much never functioned very well. And then kind of our last mode of communications were launching, various colors of either star clusters or star parachutes. And so I had that. It was like one of my first patrols that I led when we were in Haditha in 2005. It was just like one of my fire teams kind of got lost in the dark, and we're like sitting up on this building forever. And, I'm like, hey, where you at? Hey, do you hear me? Hey, where you at? And, like, I can't see him anywhere. And I was like, okay. So I just took out, I had a white star cluster, and so I launched that thing off. And then he launched one in return, and he was literally like 70 yards away, but they were just behind like a row of buildings, so I couldn't see him over there. And so I literally just yelled, I'm like, hey, Kelly, we're over here. He's like, okay. Just kind of, adds another layer to that. And so I kind of did a last one here. So it's kind of like, okay, because somebody had also asked, what if you're talking about like irregular forces or whatever. So I kind of did like, if I wanted a squad based, purely on mobility. Maybe this would be like a raiding squad, or you know, like a like just like strictly like a patrol or observation squad, or something like that. So you know, we kind of pare it down to like the traditional like 10 men, but I would have still have 3 fire teams, but now the fire teams would just have 3 guys, and they would all just have rifles. You know, so one would be hyper mobile. I'd still have 3 elements, you know, and you can still put out a very good amount of fire just in semi-automatic with good weapons. You know, and things I've talked about in other videos, and it's kind of actually one of the reasons why the Marine Corps went away from the saw, is that like one thing that, and I, you know, America, you know, we have a lot of problems militarily with some of the training and mentalities and things like that. And you watch a lot of videos from Iraq and Afghanistan, and I mean, I've been guilty of this as well, and I've seen it in person as well. Is like, you know, I think part of it's just like, sometimes like even if you're in a firefight, like you feel so safe that you're like bored, and so as soon as someone starts shooting at something, you just want to start shooting, so you kind of just start wasting through all the ammo that you've got. But like I've talked about before, is when it comes to suppression or suppressive fire, is there's absolutely an accuracy component to it, which means that like you cannot just see a hillside and then start hip shooting 200 rounds from you know, unload a whole drum from your saw at the hillside and call that suppressive fire, because one, obviously you're not aiming at any particular spot, you know, or where you see an enemy or where you think an enemy actually is. You're just kind of aiming in a general direction. But also like once you've been, you know, in a couple firefights, once you've been under fire or whatever, it's like you can distinguish the difference between rounds that are just kind of coming in your direction versus rounds that are kind of directed towards your actual position. But then also, and especially when you're talking about in fairly close quarters, is like, you know, you can see the enemy and be like, oh, hey, you know, I hear the rounds like coming this direction, but I can very clearly see he's just spraying down the building that's across the street. So it's like, why would I feel the need to be suppressed or anything like that? So, you know, kind of back to the point, is that like, you know, with just our rifles and stuff like that, if we're actually doing a good job of like, one, calling out targets, calling out contact, directing our own fires, we could have more than enough suppressive fire, more than enough firepower just with, you know, just with guys using, you know, our rifles and things like that. And obviously in this type of thing, we would sacrifice, you know, having a drone guy for, you know, just kind of a, you know, ease of mobility. But yeah, so I thought that was, you know, kind of an interesting, you know, thing that people have asked me before. You know, this would be something good to talk with you guys in the comments about as well. You know, because I know part of me thinks like, oh, hey, this is the end all be all and nobody's going to have any disagreements or whatever. But I think I did a pretty good job of kind of laying out at least some of my concepts with it. Is one, I always want, yes, we want to be good at the like general tasks, but I want something that I'm going to be the absolute fucking fantasticest best at ever. And I want that to be fire and maneuver. I'll sacrifice overall total firepower. I'll sacrifice long range, you know, accuracy, interdiction ability. But if I have the guys who are absolutely the best at being able to, you know, maneuver into position, maneuver on buildings, maneuver on, you know, enemy positions and fire, like absolutely. So that's where I want to kind of, you know, where I'll default to is like fire and maneuver. Let's be the absolute best at that. You know, and we can figure out the, you know, way to do the other stuff. We can add the augments from weapons platoon or weapons company, whatever it happens to be, when it comes to those things. And it's also some of it's a little bit incumbent on like, you know, better training and you know, and just like overall like, you know, a superior quality of like low level unit leaders. And this is something I've seen myself. I've done all of the bad things with this. I've done a lot of the good things as well, which is like, you know, kind of understanding as well, which is like, you know, of training your leaders to be leaders. So like one, be out like looking for something to do. Like, you know, of things I think that I was good at when I was patrolling is I think like I'm competitive as hell. So like I was trying to find weapons caches, trying to find IEDs, trying to find something for us to do. You know, but also like the thing I was really bad at is letting like my team leaders like do stuff, or like, you know, if we're gonna go take a building, like I always wanted to be like, you know, the first guy in or one of the first guys in. It's like, dude, you're a squad leader. Like you hang out by the street, you know, come in the middle of the pack or whatever and figure out what's going on. Like don't rush up there and get yourself shot first and then leave everyone else in the lurch. You know, but and also like, you know, communicating better. Like I think that's, you know, another thing that I did not do, you know, particularly well, is like you get accustomed to some guys making, you know, good decisions and doing things you want. So there's the part of you that thinks like, okay, now he gets it, cool. Like I can just give him the wink and he knows what I mean. It's like, no. Like you need to tell him in no like ambiguous terms what you expect from them. and then make sure that it's done. But if it's not being done, just go over there and tell them to do it. And I think too often I was, ambiguous with things, and then I would immediately let my young man temper, be like, like kind of go off on like why we weren't being more productive. And so that's the kind of training component. Is like, hey, make sure that we understand, like when you're the fire team leader, you're absolutely an active member of the shooting and of taking care of that, but also like your job is to lead the other three guys. When you're a squad leader, like your job is to lead your three team leaders, but also your whole squad, and things like that. And so kind of a last component with that training is, and this is, if there's one thing that I most kind of look back on my military career and cringe about, like one of the worst things that happened to us, I think, was that we got in so much combat my first deployment. So when we were in and around Fallujah, prior to Phantom Fury, and then we did Phantom Fury and Fallujah and all that. And like, so we got just, in as much fighting as, as anyone would want to have in that amount of time. So when we got back from that deployment, it's not that I think everybody thought that they knew everything. I think there was a little bit of that, but I can kind of look at myself for this as well. But I think one of the biggest problems that we had is that so much of the next training cycle, and obviously we had a fair amount of new guys because we had some dudes KIA, we had a lot of guys wounded, a lot of guys who were just, they're basically their enlistment is up, so they're getting out, is that a lot of training became like a big dick measuring contest because, like some of us, like had a reputation like, oh, so-and-so is a killer. Oh, so-and-so's, he's killed a lot of people, or like, oh, so-and-so like, did this or didn't do this or whatever it was. So it was like a lot of training just kind of became like, hey, I want to show everybody. I want to show the guys from the other platoon. I want to show the new guys that like, yeah, I am the door kicking son of a bitch, or like, oh, I want to prove to everybody like how much weight I can carry on my back, And so there was kind of a lot of that mentality, and so I think it really let guys kind of sit back and rest on their laurels way too much. So while we should have been able to like really come together with a ton of experience and really kind of hash a lot of these things out, like leadership wise and stuff like that. I mean, we definitely got better at it, but there was definitely a lot of, just constant dick measuring competition, or like, oh, hey, I shot so many people on, such and such day or whatever. It's like, yeah, well, you fucked this up or whatever. So like, I'm not going to listen to you on this or whatever. And it's just like, and this is where like one, being a better low level leader, and then, having your leaders at the platoon level and stuff, you need to kind of come in and be like, hey, use this as an opportunity to like kind of build your guys up in the eyes of the new guys, but also to sort of, rein them in and be like, hey, we still got to train. Hey, we still got to pass that information on in an effective way to these new guys, because now you're expecting them to be you on this next deployment. So kind of keeping that in mind, where like all the organization and stuff in the world is one thing, but you've got to have the training, and the low level leadership to go with it. But I think that pretty much wraps it up for the day, guys. But remember, only the hits count, and you can never miss fast enough to catch back up.